Well, welcome everybody. We're so delighted that you've taken the time this evening to join us so that we can discuss wireless technology and especially the impact of 5G in our communities. So what I would like to do just for housekeeping is I prefer that people are able to just sit comfortably and participate in the presentation. So I'm going to turn off the chat, except for if you have a question that you'd like to have me answer at the end of the presentation. Then go ahead and put that in the chat. And once we're through the presentation, then we'll come back and see what folks are looking for more information on. So thank you for that. And I will now go and begin a screen share. And I hope everybody can see that. So tonight's topic is 5G small cell hazards and better technology solutions. So my name is Cece Doucette, and that MTPW just means I have the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University. And I, like many joining the conversation today, had no idea there was anything to be concerned with mobile technology or wireless. And once I did my due diligence, my public school district here in Ashland, Massachusetts, became the first in the nation to begin taking precautions, and that was back in 2014. Then I worked with my Senate President Karen Spilka in Massachusetts to introduce legislation. And I was honored to be brought up to New Hampshire to testify on their groundbreaking law that we got passed up there. And I'll talk more about that tonight. And on this journey, I've had the privilege of meeting many of the world's leading scientists and doctors. And some of us formed a nonprofit, initially out of Europe, now out of Canada, called Wireless Education, where we have distilled this issue down to courses that can be completed online in about a half an hour. So we literally have off-the-shelf training ready. I would ask that everybody on the call tonight, please mute your microphones. Thank you. And in the beginning, I couldn't find anybody to talk to about this issue. And I thought I was the only one here in Massachusetts figuring it out. And then I went to the State House for a presentation that Dr. Deborah Davis brought in and found that there were people all over the Commonwealth who had already been tuned into this issue. So that was a great day. And over the last year, we have formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology as a meeting place. We hold a monthly meeting, and we would welcome anybody to join us for that. I was so honored when somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked if I would co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference in 2018. And anything in my slides tonight that has a blue underline, that's a link that will take you directly to the information that I'm referencing. And the reason why I included this link here is because these talks are all under 10 minutes. The presentations took place at a credible venue, and we hear from the retired president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg, who learned about this issue after he retired, and now he's trying to do up in Canada what we're trying to do here in the US. And Dr. Martin Paul joined us to talk about the science. Peter Sullivan joined us from Clear Light Ventures, and both of his children had been on the autism spectrum. They were diagnosed around the preschool years when they were recognizing communication disorders. And Peter today would tell anybody with a child who's having issues, certainly look to the diet and remove all of the toxic food sources, focus on organic foods, try and get the heavy metal detox done. But he says, first and foremost, what I tell parents today is do a wireless radiation detox. And I had never heard anybody say they got their children off the spectrum, but both of Peter's sons today are no longer on the spectrum. Both are young men and are thriving in our world today. So every body is different, but there can be some wonderful inroads with a little bit of information. And Theodora Scarato, the executive director of the Environmental Health Trust, also joined us at the NIH for this technology panel. So feel free to use these. All these talks are under 10 minutes, so it's a quick, credible way to introduce others to this conversation. And then most recently, I was so honored to be asked to speak at the recent EMF medical conference at the end of January. EMF stands for the electromagnetic fields of radio frequency radiation that are pulsed out of all of today's wireless infrastructure, installations, as well as all of our personal devices. So with that, I will go ahead and outline what we'll talk about tonight. We'll walk you through the legal fine print if you haven't had a chance to see that in your own devices. We'll talk about the science, both long-term and short-term. And then we'll talk about where are these radiation emissions coming from and why don't we know about it? And that will cover us with the conflicts of interest we have between industry and our federal agencies. And then let's talk about better technology solutions. Tonight's message is certainly not no technology. We love our technology and we live by it, but there are much, much better solutions out there for anything that we have with toxic wireless. And then let's talk about, once we understand all of the science and where we want to head, let's talk about next steps on how we might begin to head in that direction. So for anybody who uses an iPhone, I would invite you right now to take that out and go into settings. What I'm going to go through it applies to the iPhone, but the information comes with every wireless device. There is a website with the Environmental Health Trust called See the Fine Print that shows us other devices like the iPad, for example, over here in their fine print. It used to say, watch out for seizures, blackouts, and eye strain. But who would know that this information is there? So from the iPhone, go into settings, scroll down just a little ways and hit general. If it's an older iPhone, up at the top, you would hit about. Most people have upgraded those. So from general, most of us will go all the way down to legal and regulatory. Once you hit that, you'll see a little list up at the top, and 5 or 6 down, you'll see RF exposure. RF stands for the radio frequency radiation, or two-way microwave radiation, which the industry politely calls energy in this legal fine print. And what it tells us is 2 really important things. One, keep this device at a distance from your body or you may exceed the FCC limits for public radiation exposure. You'll see that they tell you it was tested at a certain distance from the body. In the next paragraph, it tells us to use a hands-free option. And if you choose to use the headphone, you'd do well to get a hollow tube headset or an air tube headset that give you great acoustics, kind of like a doctor's stethoscope. But up at the top, and I've got one here, up at the top, there's just these hollow tubes that go up to your head and your brain instead of a wire. Because if you put a wire in a device that's radiating and you run that right up to your head, the radiation travels up the metal and you're putting that right against your head. So earbuds, bad idea. So all along, this legal fine print has been inside of the materials that came with our phone, either in the paper product version or in the phone itself. And this doesn't just apply to our phones. It applies to all wireless devices, all smart technology, and anything they're labeling the Internet of Things will have a radio frequency antenna in there with 5 or 6 separate antennas per device that are constantly pulsing microwave radiation to make or maintain a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And again, tonight's message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And one of the conundrums with this issue is it's invisible. At least with tobacco, we can smell it, or with natural gas, they added a fragrance so we could smell that too and know to get out of harm's way. But where we are with technology today, most of us don't know that we might be getting exposed. But thankfully for our engineers, we have radio frequency radiation detection meters. And this is called an acoustometer. It allows us to hear the signals as well as see a digital reading of what they're like. So in my home, I'm speaking with you tonight using excellent technology, but I skipped the wireless and I use only hardwired technology. So that's why we see it pulsing in the green down here. I do have utility smart meters mounted on the far side of my house, which is not great. I want us to have protection so that we get to choose to retain an analog meter that's not going to radiate us and our loved ones. But for now, and I get a little bit of bleed in from my neighbors, but I keep my cell phone as a rule in airplane mode. And people know to call me on my landline, and you can forward a cell phone to a landline, or folks know to get me via email. So I still have great technology just without the radiation. But watch what happens when I take my phone out of airplane mode and it begins to transmit. So although you and I can't see or hear, many people do feel it. I'm just going to put my phone back in airplane mode while we finish tonight. A lot of people do feel this, but our cells, whether we're conscious of it or not, are taking the brunt of that hit. This is billions of cycles a second that are literally damaging our cells. So this was an idea I had. If we can measure this, I wanted to get a grant for our schools and our library and put an acoustimeter where people can just gather the data, borrow the meter. And Ashland became the first in the United States to have one of these meters on loan. And then Dr. Judy Safrir and I, when we came back from the first medical conference, we worked together on a grant with the Cultural Council, and we got another one of these meters put on loan in the Newton Public Library in Massachusetts. That's something that any of us could aim to do, is to get a radiation detection device available to the community, because seeing is believing. And once you see all this radiation coming at us, it starts to make a little bit of sense. So next, we're going to see, what does the science tell us? This study over here on the right was completed by our own government at the National Institutes of Health in the area of the National Toxicology Program. This is the world's premier toxics research agency, and they spent 2 decades investigating whether this radio frequency could cause harm. At the end of the day, they had an unprecedented 3-day peer review down at the National Institutes of Health with world-leading experts whose lives have been dedicated to studying microwave sicknesses, radio frequency radiation. And in this red oval, we see clear evidence of cancer. Clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they could assign. And it also reveals DNA damage and other biological effects. The industry will take a study like this and try and spin it and say, oh, that's just one study. You need to have more to corroborate that that's actually true. Well, right on the heels of our study coming out in 2018, Italy's Ramazzini Institute came out with another highly credible, large study that corroborated everything that we found on cell towers and cell phones here. So we know through these studies and additional studies about child and adult cancers, we know about DNA damage, and it was actually the infertility studies that really made me sit up and pay attention. This was before these other studies came out. They've taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas on. It changed the DNA, our roadmap to grow a proper person or anything. It slowed the motility, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable in just 4 hours of exposure. And then if you look at the other fertility studies, Dr. Barry Trower is a retired physicist from the Royal Navy in England, and he was a military physicist. He did help design these microwave exposures as military weapons. And he knows they have no business being in the public space. And he is very, very concerned about what we are doing to our girls and their ovaries and their ovum, and killing off the follicular material. And if you listen to Dr. Trower, you will be quite alarmed that we think we are putting humans on the extinction list with all this electrosmog that we're now exposing ourselves and our loved ones to. Neurotoxicity. We have barriers in our system that prevent toxins as they're being escorted out of the bloodstream. We have barriers in our gut, we have barriers in our brain to protect these sensitive areas. What the science is showing is that we are permeating the blood-brain barrier with microwave radiation pulses. It's opening the blood-brain barrier. And now toxins that should have been escorting out of our system are now taking a turn and going into these sensitive areas. And this can help to explain the explosions we have had with attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, Alzheimer's. And we know scientifically this is a neurotoxin. Children are not just little people. They are especially vulnerable because their DNA is still under construction. Their immune system is still under construction. Their central nervous system is still under construction. And their skulls are thinner and their brains have a higher water content. If we look at this wonderful graphic from Dr. Om Gandhi, this is as if your head were tilted sideways and this is your ear with the phone up against it. This is how far it's permeating through an adult skull and into the brain. On a 10-year-old child, it's going about 2/3 of the way into the brain. And on a 5-year-old child, this is permeating almost all the way to the other side of the skull. So we have got to start protecting our children, especially. In the short term, many people today are experiencing microwave or electromagnetic illness symptoms that they would not even think to ask whether they could be coming from their radio frequency radiation exposures. But the good news is, in many instances, with just a little education, people begin to say, I don't want to believe this, but I have not slept in the longest time. So they come back time and again and say, I just shut everything off. My head hit the pillow and I actually slept through the night for the first time. So electromagnetic sensitivities are already recognized by our own government in the Americans with Disabilities Act at the Jobs Area Network, a Jobs Accommodation Network. They even recommend what to do to accommodate employees and others who have electrical sensitivities. But who would know that? So what is happening on a day-to-day basis? Insomnia is huge. And just this week, Spain came out with an epidemiological study that examined radio frequency radiation exposures in a neighborhood and had people fill out an epidemiological study, a survey, and found much higher incidence of insomnia and nightmares, headaches. And these have been reported time and again in study after study: nosebleeds, ear bleeds, fatigue. Here in my own house, my teenage daughter, high school, optical migraine. What kid should be having a migraine, right? As soon as I quit circling my tail and decided to do something about this, I turned everything off in my house and I hardwired our technology. My daughter's headaches and nosebleeds went down greatly. And then she would only get an occasional headache or nosebleed if she allowed herself to get dehydrated. This chronic fatigue that so many people are experiencing, our cells have a finite amount of energy. They were already busy doing their regular job, cell repair, regeneration. And now we've layered on this 24/7 burden for our cells to try and deal with. And it's no wonder so many people are wiped out today. Pain from unidentified sources, skin abnormalities, rashes, heating, flushes, tingling, irregular heartbeats, too fast or too slow. Cognitive impairment is huge. So as we become older, our brains and our cognitive abilities naturally go through a gradual decline. But we are seeing earlier and earlier onset of people who are losing their cognitive abilities. And then, anger and behavior issues. When I was at that medical conference, some of the doctors were commenting that we can expect to have more outbursts of serious sociological anger, as we've seen with mass shootings and more, because as we degenerate the brain, we are paving a pathway to a lot of really troubling behavior issues. And then there's the anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. This study over here by Dr. Martin Paul in the Journal of Chemical Neuroanatomy talks about the impacts and what it's doing to our nervous system. So it's not just us, it's every living cell on the planet. So every bird, bee, pollinator. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but for those concerned with climate change, please know that all of this wireless infrastructure consumes 10 times more energy than the common sense solutions, which are to bring the technology right up through high-speed fiber optics or copper or cable right to the premises and stop putting all this wireless in. Now let's talk about cell towers. So let's look at where these points of emissions are in our communities. So there is great non-industry funded science out there, and that's really the only place we should be getting our information from. Don't listen to mainstream media. Don't listen to popular magazines. Don't listen to newspapers. Go to the science, and we have epidemiological studies that show increases in cancer, increases in insomnia, increases in neurological issues within 500 meters or about 1,640 feet from a cell tower. So there is a website called antennasearch.com that anybody can go to, type in an address here in the United States, and it will usually return a search in a 3-mile radius of the big cell antennas, the macro cell antennas, which is what has been running our 3G and 4G, and before that, first and second generation, now third and fourth generation technology. So I put in our state house where our senators and state reps go to work, 24 Beacon Street. There were so many of these macro cell antennas in downtown Boston that it can only give me a 1-mile radius, not a 3-mile radius. 70 major cell towers with 1,184 antennas, big antennas within a mile of our state house. They used to start in industrial parks, 300 feet up in the air, far away from where any of us spend our time. Now they're painting them the same color and slapping them up on the side of buildings or putting them on rooftops. So that's why we have just 70 towers. Each tower probably has 30 or 40, but still, look at all of this. And here's what a graphic looks like. We are just so decimated in electrosmog in Boston. So that's the macro cell antennas. And what the science shows us, I did this for my town. There's a website here called mapdevelopers.com where you can draw a circle around a pinpoint. This is where we have a cell tower in one part of our little town of Ashland, Massachusetts. The science again says within about 1,600 feet, there are health risks. In that circle, we have 135 homes and businesses on all these streets in our community that probably don't even know that they're living in a danger zone. And then when we look at property values, there are real estate studies that have been done that show within about 2,400 feet or 720 meters of a cell tower, we see property values start to drop. So when we add in this purple circle, this is the whole area where property values are potentially in jeopardy. So additionally, all these streets in Ashland. What does that mean? About 300 properties. Average property value, and this is playing it low. Other estimates say 10% to 20% loss. So let's just assume a $40,000 loss per home in property value for our town. Multiply that out by these 300 properties, and we are looking at a potential $12 million tax loss here in Ashland. So this is very serious. Even for those who don't care about the health, they're going to say we're all going to die anyway. Most will care about their property values. So then what is 5G? 5G simply means fifth generation technology. And this link here will take you to a lot of information, but I'm going to give you some of the highlights. The industry is promising that we will have faster entertainment downloads, smart cities, superhighways. With 5G, we are not getting rid of all those big cell towers. Those are needed. If you look at this electromagnetic spectrum over here, these longer waves here in the microwave section, those are what allow our cell signals and our data to come invisibly into our spaces indoors. Those big waves can get through. They have pretty much monetized all they can. There's not much new innovation to be done on that part of the spectrum. It's all built out. So what's left are these dinky little millimeter waves down here as we get further along the microwave spectrum. And the industry is spinning it up that will have great downloads, faster speeds, but they can't go very far, these little millimeter waves. And they can't go through objects. So they can get, distorted by rain or snow or a leaf on a tree. And so what we see, unfortunately, happening in many communities where industry just comes barreling in is they start lopping off the trees or removing them altogether, which is horrible for our communities and our air. So this is what some of them look like. This is like a monopole. They're sticking them on street lights. They may be hanging them off the wires in some instances. And their goal is to put millions of these small cells at the curb outside of our bedrooms in the public access way every 2 to 12 houses. And there is a website in Boston that shows every one of these different colored dots is a different vendor over here. And every one of these polka dots is a small cell right in the Boston neighborhoods on top of the 1,000+ macro cells that are already there. So this is happening, and it's happening in real time. So it's critical that we begin to tune into this. And then every time they've rolled out a new generation of technology, they've always promised, oh, everybody's going to get this technology. Everybody's going to have super fast, great technology. And then what they do is they concentrate their business where they can make the most money in busy downtown areas, cities where there's a large population. And then the people out in the rural communities and the farming communities still aren't getting good signal. So this time around, they're going to say, oh, we're going to hang satellites in the sky and we'll be able to beam this radiation down. And anybody on the ground with a reception device will be able to get excellent technology. So what that means is you're not going to be able to go anywhere without being radiated if they're beaming this from thousands of satellites in the sky. And not only that, look at this pollution we are putting in our skies. And there's a whole nother conversation to be had about what happens when that debris breaks down and cuts loose, and what's it doing to our weathering systems. And it's not a great idea. And then why are they pushing this so hard? The industry is looking for new revenue streams. If you notice, if you do a little bit of investigating, you'll find out that the wireless industry is buying up the entertainment industry as they continue to push all this streaming. And there's another revenue stream for gathering our data, taking it and selling it off to third-party vendors who want to sell us their products, and or to governments and others who may get their hands on that data that we perhaps for our privacy reasons do not wish to share. So somewhere along the line, industry started saying, well, consumers want this. Consumers are creating this demand, but we are not. We are not. The industry is pushing this demand out to the public to pad their revenue stream. So I don't know about you, but I never woke up and said, gee, I need 5G. I need a lot faster technology. My technology's great. And then somewhere in that, we went from being consumers to being consumed. And I wish I could remember who first used that phrase, because it just sums it up so well. They have just forced this technology into our communities. And for those who are tuned into the environmental justice issue, this visual here are the big cell towers in a neighborhood in Boston in Hyde Park. And there's a woman there who went and started looking at the small cells next, and she noticed a pattern that in the communities of color, they are putting those installations in very quickly, and she's not seeing them so much in the white communities. So environmental justice is a big problem here. They did that out in Worcester too, with the utility smart meter pilot program with National Grid. in a community where people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their head and food on the table, they're not going to have time to tune into these issues. And they went and put these toxic utility smart meters on everybody's homes in Worcester. So the kicker is this technology was never safety tested. And I'm going to take us out of here for a minute, and we're going to listen to Senator Richard Blumenthal in Congress.
We've heard from a lot of witnesses from you today and others previously about the very important potential of 5G technology. It promises to bring us a new era of connectivity with internet speeds much as 5 times faster than what we have today, with much lower latency, and that's all a good thing. But 5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implications to those additional sites that are likely to be located close to homes, schools, workplaces, and closer to ground? Correct?
Correct, Senator. Yes.
So in December of 2018, I sent a letter to FCC Commissioner Carr asking him to cite for me recent scientific studies demonstrating the safety of this technology. What research has been done, where has it been published and compiled? He has essentially failed to do so, and just echo the general statements of the FDA, which shares regulatory responsibility for cell phones with the FCC. If you go to the FDA website, pretty unsatisfactory. There basically is a cursory and superficial citation to existing scientific data saying, quote, the FDA has urged the cell phone industry to take a number of steps, including support additional research on possible biological effects of radio frequency fields for the type of signal emitted by cell phones. I believe that Americans deserve to know what the health effects are, not to prejudge what scientific studies may show, and they deserve also a commitment to do the research on outstanding questions. So my question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Ferry, how much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? I stress independent research. Is that independent research ongoing? Has any been completed? Where can consumers look for it? And we're talking about research on the biological effects of this new technology.
Thank you, Senator. And I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, rely on the
Not a good volume on here.
The requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge, right now. Happy to visit with you.
Cece, can you raise the volume?
We had 34 participants.
And we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effects?
Senator, I'm not aware either, but I do know that with small cells especially, you're going to have lower power levels.
Shit,
Of course, as from a carrier perspective, you want to be able to
there's no volume control.
so that interference is the lowest interference possible. So I would think that some of those studies or some of that information could be utilized in looking at the health consequences. But no, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here as far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, so that is what the industry did. They brought all this technology to market with no safety testing at all. And then to make it even more insulting, Computer World and others are now reporting that they're going out and doing testing of 5G signals, and they're saying 5G is a bad joke. They want to put these cell antennas right in front of our homes, and it's not even delivering any faster speeds than what we already had with 4G. So for many reasons, our communities should be encouraged to do everything within their power to stop small cells. And then some would say, you know, if this has been going on, how could it be kept from us? Why don't we know? Harvard Law School Center for Ethics published this 59-page report, and it's available free online. Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And in there, it basically says they're using the big tobacco playbook: suppress evidence of harm, deep pockets, lobbying, capture the media, and then you can promote your toxic products and nobody's going to know the difference. And then, as Senator Blumenthal indicated, there's a conflict of interest with the FDA as well. When our $30 million US National Toxicology Program study concluded clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, the FDA should have taken that, because they commissioned that study. They should have taken that and translated it into public policy to protect you and I. Instead, Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, who heads up that part of the FDA today, he wasn't there when they initiated this study, but he's in charge today. He went back to the FCC and said, no problem, keep doing what you're doing. No need to change those radiation exposure limits. And one might ask, what would possess Dr. Shuren to do that? Well, if you dig around a little, you find out that his wife is a partner in a law firm that represents the wireless industry greatly. So in Europe, in the scientific community, they have something called the precautionary principle. If there is some evidence mounting that shows there could be a problem with an exposure, we are supposed to stop, complete the research. If it's proven safe, then continue. And we have not done that here in the United States. And I just want to put out a word of caution. When we start this conversation with others, the first thing some people will do is they're going to Google, is 5G safe? And one of the things that comes up at the top of the list is this article from a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning journalist by the name of Bill or William Broad from the New York Times. And in his article, he's saying the 5G health hazard that isn't, they're trying to blame the Russians for fear mongering. But what people wouldn't know is there's a huge conflict of interest at the New York Times now. They have a 5G Verizon lab there, and they have industry on their board. And Ireland, the ombudsman in Ireland, in fact, called out the New York Times for violating the Truth and Accuracy Code, for not doing true investigative journalism and reporting industry-favored messaging. And it's not just there, it goes all the way to the top. People time and again will say, and I've been in rooms where we're giving a presentation and someone will say, well, I just did a search on this, and look, the World Health Organization says there's no problem. Well, you have to look at dates. There is still old information that comes up first at the World Health Organization. Who would know that in 2020, because the science has become so strong, even the World Health Organization has reopened their investigation. Back in 2011, they already classified this radiation as a group 2B possible human carcinogen. And the industry will spin it and say, oh, that's same category as coffee and pickled vegetables. Well, coffee was in there because of the chemicals it was being grown with, and pickled vegetables were being cured with formaldehyde. And in both cases, there were certain populations that were getting cancers from these toxins. So you have to really understand how to look for this information and where to find it. But who would know? There are 2 groups at the World Health Organization. One has very heavy industry ties and no credible scientists or medical doctors in their group. The other one is science-based. So we're waiting to see who on this recent round of reinvestigating EMFs is going to be appointed to the World Health Organization, but we are already seeing signs that the industry group is once again lobbying heavily. So that's all the bad news. Now let's talk about the good news. Martin Luther King taught us that when we have social changes, there's 3 avenues that it comes through. One is the public engages, which is why we're doing informational sessions like this. 2, the courts rule and hold the guilty accountable. And 3, public policy is enacted. And it finally catches up to, in this case, the science. So we'll just whip through some fast things. Here in Shelburne, Massachusetts, citizens worked with their town. They put a 1,500-foot setback in their bylaws from any residence and a 3,000-foot setback from schools. In Burlington, Massachusetts, they did something really groundbreaking. They spent a year investigating, set
Well,
up a townwide committee. Can you please
good
mute
start.
your microphones, please? Please
You
mute.
bought more?
Michael Arnold, can you please mute?
Oh, I thought you were gonna eat them.
I can't eat them all. I just already had some.
Okay,
Well,
so
you know,
Burlington, when they hired a lawyer who specializes in telecom law, and in their policy, they said, you can't just come into our communities and drop and run with this equipment. Not only does it have to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, it also has to blend in with the environment. And we're going to require you to come back every single year and recertify that every one of these small cells is still viable in our community. And we as a town don't have the revenue stream to cover that independent review. So we're going to need to assess the vendor a fee for every small cell to have it recertified. And with that, the Verizon lawyer said, well, we don't want to set precedent for an annual recertification or a fee, because mind you, they plan to put millions of these in, and this would cut into their revenue stream. But you can see here, other towns are already pushing back. Down at the Cape, there's a lawsuit going on against the cell towers that were put up in the antenna without notifying anybody. And they target schools, they target hospitals, they target senior citizens, they target our towns, and they target churches, unfortunately. And then all across the nation, all across the world, communities are waking up and pushing back. A grandmother in Easton, Connecticut figured this out and worked with her town. They got a ban. Hawaii County on the Big Island voted in a moratorium to ban 5G. Bermuda has a temporary ban. Brussels and Geneva, where the World Health Organization is, they've already banned 5G as well. And this is happening all over the world, but we don't hear about it because the industry has captured mainstream media. But good things are happening. Here's where the legal action is happening. The FCC had a chance to investigate the science that was filed with them. They completely ignored it. And now they're being sued by these 2 groups. And in January, they had oral arguments in the federal courts, and the judges were not impressed. They're looking at 11,000 pages of testimony, 27 volumes, and the industries and the FCC is trying to say, oh, well, you know, it's fine. So the judges are saying, well, tell us exactly what due diligence did you do? And they said, well, the FDA said, and they said, so what did the FDA do? And that's where they left it. So we're hoping to get a ruling, hopefully favorably, in the next 4 to 6 months on that. And then this is what happened just last Monday. It used to be with this OTARD rule, means over the air reception device. You could, if you wanted, mount a satellite dish on your roof, and that's just between you and the satellite. That's a one-way communication between you and the satellite. It doesn't bother anybody else right there. Now what the industry and the FCC have done is change that rule. So now they can come knock on your door or your neighbor's door and say, hey, and offer you whatever their sweetheart deal is, be it free Wi-Fi, or maybe they'll even throw in free 5G phones, if you will allow them to mount this toxic wireless technology on your roof or on your property. And now you will be spraying and pulsing this toxic radiation at yourself, your loved ones, and all your neighbors 24/7. So our bodies are never going to get a break from this if we don't get educated quickly and educate those around us. I heard from Libby Kelly last week out in Tucson, Arizona. They're already getting calls and people are knocking on their doors to start selling this new toxic radiation on top of our properties. So this is happening in real time. I'm so grateful that some legislators and municipal leaders are on with us tonight. You should know that there's already been a lawsuit won. The regulators took the FCC to court. And what happened is we already paid a long time ago on our phone bills to have proper technology run all the way to our homes and our offices. Instead, what the industry did was some clever accounting. They took that money from the hardwired bucket, they put it in the wireless bucket, and then they started bringing the hardwired technology in, but they would stop out in the middle of the road and then start throwing up all these wireless nodes instead of bringing it directly to the premises. That lawsuit has already been won. So our towns, our states can go back and reclaim that money to fund the proper technology that is safe and sustainable in our communities. And then Americans with Disabilities Act, this is going to be big in our towns because so many people are getting sick from this, and we need to start building protections in. We've already had one lawsuit at the prestigious Face School in Massachusetts, where for the first time in American courts, they recognize that you don't have to have heat from a device, which is what our FCC standards are set at, is heat, because they recognize that at hundreds of thousands of levels below that heat threshold, there are biological effects. There's also a lawsuit happening right now out in California with the Los Angeles Unified School District, and the court has recognized non-thermal effects, and they're allowing that lawsuit to go through as well. So this is the brightest star that we have in our country right now, and that's the national level, state level bill that we got passed in just 7 months' time in New Hampshire. We've had bills in Massachusetts for 8 years or more that have moved out of committee but have never been passed into law, sharing the exact same information with New Hampshire. Rep. Pat Abrami wrote a bill. I helped him with some of the fine points that he wanted to include. We testified. We had Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada flew in and testified. Dr. Paul Haru, one of the world's leading scientists, drove down from Canada and testified. And then a number of citizens in New Hampshire testified because they and their children and others they know are becoming sick from this. So they asked, why has the insurance industry put in RF exclusions? Who knew? Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best, long since recognized this is a huge leading risk and they don't cover damages. So that leaves us in our towns liable for damages. We talked about the fine print. We talked about the FCC ignoring the science. And we allow 100 times more radiation to our public than other countries are doing. Why is that? And how come nobody is looking at the cumulative effect of multiple devices at once, like 30 devices in a classroom, plus cell phones, plus the wireless access points. And day after day with all of that, nobody is protecting us from the cumulative effects. So they got that law passed in less than a year through their House, through their Senate, through Governor Sununu. And they spent a year investigating with leading experts. We had the industry at the table too. So if they started sharing information that the science didn't support, they could open up a conversation about that. And they issued a report, groundbreaking, on November 1st that documents the corruption between our government agencies and the industry. And it makes 15 recommendations to start fixing those laws at the federal level. And that's 2 of them, one to address the environmental impact at the federal level and to get the telecom law fixed. And then 13 recommendations that we can start using in our communities, start transitioning our schools to hardwired technology, start monitoring all these emissions, build databases, get our building inspectors trained. And there's much more in the report. It's when I first had it printed up, it's 370 or 390 pages. And I thought, uh-oh, that's going to turn off a lot of people. But the way they set it up, is the report itself, the majority report, is only in the first 17 pages. So you get the meat of it in the first 17 pages. And then there's a minority report. So there were 13 commissioners, 10 voted with the majority after they learned what this issue really is. 3 voted with the minority, 2 were from industry, and then 1 senator sided with industry. But the beautiful thing is they put their minority report in here. So you get to see all the messaging that they're giving to our towns. And in the back of the appendix, we have all the meeting minutes, and this was very unique. New Hampshire did a clear and transparent process in which the public was invited to attend. So all the minutes are there, and in the last minutes of the commission's meetings, they talk about the minority report, and Senator Denise Riccardi and Dr. Paul Heroux counter a lot of the disinformation that's included in that minority report. So this is groundbreaking. So let's talk quickly about what we can do, right? Let's work with our legislators, get laws to protect us, but start taking charge of your devices and only turn on those antennas when you need them on. And let's start thinking about the secondhand radiation that we're exposing to our poor children, to pregnant women, to our pets. Don't leave your pets in the room with the router on all night. But it's not rocket science. In your
Wish you had this woman. She is really off the wall.
Michael Arnold, please mute yourself. At the back of your router, there are Ethernet ports. Just run a big Ethernet cable, get a shielded one that has aluminum foil on the inside. That keeps the dirty,
Ethernet cable,
that keeps the dirty electricity from bleeding
not
out
the
into the
router.
room. And then there's an Ethernet switch, which is like an extension cord for electronics where you can hook up multiple devices. And who knew, you can get a little adapter for your cell phone, you can get an adapter for your tablets, for your laptops. And then if you have the choice, reactivate your landline if you've already gotten rid of it, and you can forward your cell phone to your landline. And it's not going to break the bank for most of us, but there are resources. We need to start educating our healthcare teams to get the proper training on this. These videos from the medical conference are coming online soon. They will get continuing medical education credits. Doctors, nurses, first responders, they all need this. There's a website they can go to today to look at the science with the medical community. And for our engineers and physicists and technologists and architects, who've only ever been taught you have to have heat to have harm, there's an excellent paper that came out of that building's roundtable conference at the NIH. This will walk all of you through what the risks are and how to do a clean built environment with technology. Even the IEEE, which is the professional organization that set up our high levels way back when, they're now recognizing that we have biological risks that we need to account for. And there's a great TED Talk with a former Silicon Valley engineer that talks about this as well. And then there are so many great resources. This little book, Wireless Wise Kids, is like a scholastic book. Our little nonprofit has a schools and families course, a corporate safety course. They're all priced really low. We just want to educate as many as we can and still keep our little nonprofit afloat. The award-winning film Generation Zapped, you can get it through your library. If they subscribe to Canopy with a K, Canopy, or Hoopla, and you can watch that for free on PBS. Bert Wolf has even done a couple of episodes. And then 5gcrisis.com has a toolkit where you can go pull all these great templates to start educating your community and your municipality. But don't go it alone. Get others around you educated first, and then go talk to your leadership, because they need to feel empowered to take this from you and try and do something with you on this. And if you're just one person, there's so many priorities, it's easy to just kind of blow you off. So get others engaged and speaking up with you. Avoid excessive screen time. You know, we need to start, we've been on this all Wi-Fi all the time honeymoon, and we need to bring that pendulum back to the middle where we have great technology and we use it as necessary, not as our playground. Our kids are watching. They see us fall into the black hole of our cell phones and our technology. So we need to set limits for ourselves and for our children. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no more than 2 hours for grown kids. For the little ones, no screen time at all. So there are guidelines out there, and we need to model that good behavior. And I love this poster over here that's online, 50 Ways to Take a Break. It reminds us what we used to do before technology took over our lives. All these things that build a proper good human and keep us in equilibrium. So then there's also this wonderful book called The Earth Prescription by medical doctor Laura Conover. It turns out all living things were meant to be connected to the earth because we get electrons that come up and help regulate our own biochemistry and bioelectricity. And now that we live off the ground, we used to wear leather-soled shoes, and those would still allow the electrons to come up into our body. But now we're all walking around in rubber-soled shoes, and that does not allow the electrons to go up. So, you know, living here in the Northeast, it's not real practical to think you can go walking around outside barefoot most of the year. So what Dr. Conover did is she took every one of our 4 seasons, and she's got great ideas in there for how you can ground naturally throughout the year. Who knew? Just walking around the yard, touching the high water content areas of something that is grounded, like a tree or a plant or pine needles. As soon as you touch that, you are automatically grounded. So I love that book. That was really fun. So where do we go from here? Don't take my word on any of this. Please do your due diligence. I got in way over my head, so I built myself a research repository to get back to important items that I had found. So if anybody wants to go out to understanding EMFs, by all means, I've set up a page for municipal leaders so we can stand in their shoes and see what they're up against in their systems and how we can work together to bring safe technology. And then, critically important, let's stop doing what the industry tells us we need to do and start thinking for ourselves and prioritize what's in the public's best interest, not the industry's revenue stream. And our government in the Centers for Disease Control already has a principle called ALARA, and this is also in Europe. Let's get to as low as reasonably achievable. Right now, it's all Wi-Fi all the time. But we would never leave ourselves or our kids out in the sun 24 hours a day. We would never sit there in an X-ray machine unprotected 24 hours a day. So what makes us think we can sit in this radiation electrosmog for 24 hours a day and be okay? So it's critically important to take measurements so that we know where this is and what our starting point is, do the gap analysis, and then figure out how to get to as low as reasonably achievable using the recommended biological effect guidelines, not our government guidelines, because they were never set up for biological effects, but we have resources to show us what we should be aiming for. And the Building Biology Institute trains professionals who you can bring into your home or office. You know, some people like to get into the nitty-gritty and take care of it themselves. Others are horrified and just want somebody to come fix it. And there are credentialed building biologists who have been trained to do this. So you're not alone. We need to begin fixing our local town ordinances so that we have codified law so the industry can't just come in and tell us we have to do it. Granted, they did strip our rights because they say you can't have any health considerations or you can't deny a permit based on health considerations, because that's what they put in the law, unfortunately. But there are many other things that you can put in your bylaws. We should start putting in code amendments to start mapping all these antennas so anybody in the town can look and see where they are. We should start monitoring these emissions on, you know, surprise testing. Don't let the industry do it, but get out there and do these tests so that we get true readings. And 5G Crisis Toolkit has a sample ordinance. They have a sample law that anybody can use as a starting point with their municipality and their legislators. And they've got a checklist of things you might want to start looking at your own bylaws for. And critically important, we need to tell the public when these cell applications are coming in, everybody deserves a right to know, especially those who are already electromagnetically sensitive and disabled. They will not be able to stay in their home if one of these antennas shows up. So we need to start creating low radio frequency safe zones. And you can hire a company like Cityscape to come in and do a wireless master plan. So it's not all willy-nilly with whatever vendors decide they want to put in. And we've got to start updating our building codes to comply with the ADA. And when people get sick from this and they can no longer live in their apartment because they don't own the building, where are they going to go? We need to have transition shelters, and we need to have affordable housing that accommodates ADA. So in our municipalities, refuse the utility smart meters. Those are another toxic exposure over which the inhabitants have no control. And oftentimes, as we heard at the medical conference, it's when these smart meters or small cells go in that people start getting sick. Reinventing wires is the roadmap to proper technology in our communities. It's free and online. And then bring in experts. All of our legal teams in our towns, most of them, very few of them have any idea what the telecom ins and outs really are. So please don't feel like you're going to be scared to have to bring in an expert. You are going to have a lot of liability if you don't bring in the expert. So do it early on, be proactive. And again, there's training there to train your whole municipality or your whole company literally in a half an hour online. And we need to get our medical community trained, and that includes our fire and rescue and police, because they are on the front lines just as much as our doctors and nurses are. And all of our healthcare providers, our acupuncturists, our chiropractors, many of them are already up to date on what the radiation is doing, but there's now credentialed training. They can get their CMEs and CEs for this. And then please, let's start protecting our kids in the schools. There's a new project that just launched called Tech Safe Schools. They've done 3 webinars. One is with a team of lawyers from all over the country that explain why it's a bad idea to keep allowing this wireless in our schools, because our schools are legally liable for the damages. They also did a webinar on the science and a webinar on how to remediate. We've got this training course here, literally less than the cost of a movie ticket. Your whole family can go out and get trained on this. And let's do what Cyprus in the Mediterranean already did. Their medical community already recognizes, they've already put fact sheets out to the public. And during the pandemic, they put out this guide on safe internet connections, especially for children and distance learning. So the bottom line is hardwire your technology, turn off those radiation signals all the time, except when you really need to be on the internet and you don't have an Ethernet connection. So we need to educate our communities. We should be sponsoring public regional forums. We should be engaging all of our municipal associations, the school committees, the building officers, the municipal associations, the teachers associations, the Board of Education, the electrical and the other unions. Everybody needs to know about this. So start where you are. If you belong to any of these groups, if you have friends or family that belong to any of these groups, invite them into this conversation, and please contact our legislators, because we have to get laws that protect us. So with that, I will leave you with some contact information. I will put this PowerPoint presentation on YouTube in the description of this video when I get a chance to put it up in the next couple of days. But feel free to go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology. A lot of this information is mounted there. You can email me at ma4, the number 4, safetech@gmail.com. And you can also find me through Wireless Education. So with that, we will come back to this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a second to look at the chat. Oh, you're welcome, for everybody who's saying thank you. One of the slides showed Burlington having loads of towers, but they got the telecom company to withdraw its application. Those towers were the big cell towers. The ones that were withdrawn were the small cell towers. So thank you, Lori, for that question. Oh, I apologize about the video when we were listening to Senator Blumenthal. I realize that I'm using a professional mic here, and not the little mic on my computer. So I apologize. It wasn't till the end that I picked up my mic and put it in front of my computer so we could hear him better. Let's see. Okay. How can we get more information on the 5G small cells in terms of where they are located? Call your town planning board or zoning board or your select board. They are in charge of those applications that come in, and ask them to do a mapping so every citizen can quickly look and see where those are. That's what the city of Boston did, and that's how I was able to get that map done. Okay, let's see. It looks like one new message just came in. It was just thanks so much. So with that, I will go ahead and invite people to raise their hands if they have any other questions. There's an icon down at the bottom called reactions. And if you have something you'd like to say or you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and do the hand raise thing. It throws up this cute little yellow palm and I can see people there. Okay. Oh, here we go. Jim Kelty, please unmute yourself. Hi, Jim. Nice to have you here from Vermont.
Yeah, sorry, I'm late. But and maybe you've already talked about this. I just started listening about 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
But I talked to Arthur Furstenberg in New Mexico several weeks ago, and he said that in Santa Fe, they have filed a lawsuit challenging, I think it's clause 704 of the 1996 Telecom Act. And so they haven't been rolling out 5G in Santa Fe because they're awaiting the outcome of that lawsuit. Are there any other communities that are filing, that are challenging that clause in the 96 Telecom Act?
I think that the law is the law. Some people will push and say, this makes no sense. The science is showing harm. So they will push. And if you get enough public interest going on, you may get somebody on your boards in your towns to say, wait, this makes sense. Let's slow this down. But as far as the lawsuits go, we know that the Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense and other groups are also suing because they have failed to address the scientific literature, in the hopes that we will fix that Section 704 of the Telecom Act. And I'll tell you what happened in Keene, New Hampshire. While the New Hampshire Commission was investigating this, the industry was in Keene trying to get small cell applications approved. And so there's a wonderful woman there who's a retired attorney. And she just started educating the Keene City Council, and they would come up with questions and she would come to me and I would coach her on, where she can find resources to answer their questions. And they received enough credible information that they said, you know what, let's put a pause on these 5G applications until that commission report comes out. So they did. They put a pause on, they put a ban on any new small cell infrastructure. And then Beth Ann Cooley is a member of the Cellular Telephone Industry Association, and she was the one that the CTIA appointed to sit on that New Hampshire commission. So Beth Ann Cooley is attending these commission meetings and she's listening to all the science. And from what I understand, what she did is she went to the mayor of Keene, and I don't know if she threatened legal action or what, but she got that Keene mayor to do a revote with his city council, and they voted 8-7 to overturn that ban. So the industry will stop at nothing. So don't expect somebody to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Citizens need to activate their voice and speak up and not stop, because nobody's going to take the ball and run with it. It's up to us to protect our communities. Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. I just had a question come in from Ray to say, how did you convince the school boards to embrace hard wiring since much of the class is conducted with wireless? So here in Ashland, we are the first in the nation to have that little sign hanging in our classrooms, but our schools are still waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do. And so what we've discovered is that the industry has penetrated at the state, not only at the federal level, but at the state level. They went into our state education authorities, made these sweetheart deals, made it sound like all Wi-Fi is the way to go. Your kids are going to need this. They got it embedded in the curriculum. And now our school boards are being held accountable in their state reviews for integrating all this into the curriculum. So if you choose not to, what's going to happen? You're going to get a poor review. It's going to affect your funding. It could affect your job. So when we raise this with our school districts, they look at us like deer in the headlights and they don't know what to do. So we need enough parents being informed and speaking up and showing up and getting in front of our boards of education and getting these things changed. But I think with the launch of Tech Safe Schools, with that legal webinar, we may start to see schools become empowered so that they feel empowered enough to speak up the chain and say, wait a minute, don't evaluate us on this. There's better technology to be had without harming us and the children. So it's got to take a concerted effort from everybody. All right. Shirley, go ahead and unmute. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from sunny, I hope, Florida.
It is, it is. I've been working with someone specifically looking at cell site permits, and I would just like to give a hint to everyone that just because you go into your town office doesn't mean you will get all of them, because although a town has many cell permit situations, if you have a county road that goes through that town, the permits can be applied for through the county right of way. So in other words, don't stop at one perspective of your geographic area, is check at all levels. So the county levels and the town levels.
Yeah, that's great advice, Shirley. Thank you so much. So yeah, when you're talking to one, ask if the other is also doing permitting, and start asking our towns to put it in their codes that they're going to start mapping and tracking so we can all see where these are. So, and Shirley, I wanted to give you a shout out for the work that you've done with your schools down there. I know you're a retired educator and you have been tireless in your efforts. So thank you very much. All right, anybody else care to raise their hand right now? Okay. All right. Well, you all have been very generous with your time tonight. I thank you for tuning in. I think this will be the first of many conversations we're going to have like this. So please take this, take it to your towns and say, please look at this. And then I am available. If your towns want to bring me in, I would love to give a one-on-one presentation to them. We can talk about more details. If you want to work with your libraries, we can do Zoom events through the libraries to educate the community. But with the OTARD rule coming live, this just hit a whole new level of watch out, because it's coming literally into your neighborhood. As if the small cells weren't bad enough. Now they can just skip right over any permitting and go right to your neighbor who's going to think they're going to have the best technology, right? So we are in get up and go mode right now, guys. So let me know how I can help. And thank you everybody for your time. And I look forward to seeing you at the next turn. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cece.
You're welcome, everybody. And you're all heroes. Thank you for everything you're doing out there.
So we
Thank
should
you.
write to our legislators like crazy?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
I'm going to study up all these websites now, and especially yours.
Yeah.
Especially about OTARD.
Great.
Yeah, if anything that I've done helps you to connect the dots even faster, just take it and run with it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cecilia, from Tom and Alan and Giovanni present today.
Oh, all the way from?
Australia.
Oh, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you.
Take care. You take care, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cece. It's Virginia.
Wonderful.
See, it's Jim Kelty again. Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure, go ahead, Jim.
if we bring in an expert to talk to our local city council, are we violating the 96 Telecom Act?
No, not at all. Not at all. You can talk about health effects all you want. You just can't deny a permit based on health effects. But if you look at that Reinventing Wires set of guidelines, health is only one problem. Our towns are faced with sustainability issues, energy consumption issues, legal risk exposure. There's like a dozen more reasons why it's a bad idea to have wireless in our communities, but they simply don't know. But they cannot. What'll happen is if you start talking about the health issues and the industry can say, oh, they denied this because of the health issues, then they can take you to court. Good news is it's cheap litigation and it buys you some time. So even going to court is not the worst thing in the world. You won't have to pay, according to attorney Andrew Campanelli, you won't have to pay, the industry's legal fees or anything. You will have to pay your own legal fees, but delay as long as you can, because there are lawsuits that could change the course of this. And what's your town going to do? You've allowed all this technology in, and now it might become illegal. And now it's all in your community. Who's going to come in and clean all that up? So we need to put the brakes on and really think about this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we can talk about health. We just can't deny an application based on health or environmental concerns. Okay.
Right. I mean, I suggested in my community, I suggested that we bring in an expert to talk about the health effects of wireless radiation. And someone said, well, we can't do that because it's against the law because of the 96 Telecom.
Yeah, there's just so much they don't know that they do have a foot to stand on. So what you might do is go back and say, there's a publication out that talks not just about the health, but a dozen other reasons why wireless looks to be a really poor investment in our communities. Can we get on the agenda and talk about that? They might give maybe a 20-minute block that we could review some of that. So yeah, lots of different ways to open the conversation, and we want to support them. None of us woke up one day and said, I want to be in the middle of this mess. So let's see what we can do to help them help us. Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim. It's nice to see you.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Nina, go ahead. Hi.
Yeah, in Sheffield, we've actually rewritten the bylaws. So a couple of things besides permits and stuff is we've made the telecom people who are going to be putting in the small cells liable for any kind of damages or health lawsuits, and also compliance. If we have this OTARD rule with the individuals, what are they liable for? And how do we know that the telecom is going to adhere to the compliancy rules for an individual unit on somebody's house?
Exactly. And who takes responsibility when lightning strikes that or a storm comes along and now you've got all this radiation emitting stuff falling all over the ground? They're going to make these sweetheart deals to the homeowners, but there's a lot of risk involved. So that's why I decided to start these community conversations. Let's start where we are, start sharing with all the friends and loved ones and colleagues and municipal leaders and legislators, because this is happening right now in real time. So at least now we have this resource that's current and we can share with others.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Cece,
Jim.
I've got another comment to make. So in the town where I live in Vermont, the AT&T has just filed a 60-day advance notice, and their plan is to add more transmitters to a cell tower that's not far from where I live.
Oh, Jim, I'm sorry.
So there's already a tower there. They're going to add 6 more transmitters to it.
I think we saw something very similar in my town. They submitted an application on the same pad that the cell tower sits on now. They were going to take down 3 antennas, and in its place, they were going to put up 9. And I read the application, and nowhere in there did they say they're introducing new technology. And so when I went to that planning board meeting and the lawyer was there, I said, so are you bringing 5G into Ashland? And they said, yes, we are. And nowhere in that application did they indicate that they're not just replacing old ones with a current version of the new, they're putting new technology in without even telling our towns.
Uh-huh. So
So
what would be my best recourse at this point? They filed the 60-day advance notice. Is there anything that can be done? I mean, can you, for example, there's already a tower there. Is it too late to ask for an environmental impact statement?
you can ask, but Andrew Campanelli is this lawyer out in New York, and he used to work for the telecom industry. And then when he realized what was really going on, he switched teams, and now he represents municipalities and citizens. And he wins 75 to 80% of his cases if he's engaged before the equipment goes in.
Yeah.
Once it goes in, you may need to look at shielding or relocating, but if we relocate, there's no guarantee that we're not going to get exposed wherever we go.
Right,
So that's
right.
why it's critical to get this whole machine moving, where citizens are speaking up, empowering their towns to do something about it, empowering their legal team to do something about it, and empowering our legislators to fix these laws that have our municipalities thinking they're hamstrung, when there are actually many actions they can take to strengthen what we have and still be within the restraints of the law. So, yeah. And if you can, Jim, educate others around you so it's not just you taking the brunt of this, and then go.
Right.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions? Okay, everybody. Thank you again so much for your time. Nice to see folks from Colorado, another retired school teacher. And just keep on trying, everybody. We're making changes and it's important, and we can just try our best. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. I'm going to end now.